Testing. Oh, we're live. Sorry to jam on you like that. All right, we're gonna get going. It's a little messy today, but we're gonna hang out and talk about modern gods and emerging gods and also ancient ones that we've left behind. So all of the above. I still have to grab my tea though, so give me 5 minutes and I'll be back.
But when the show finally turned on for the first time to get the bugs worked out, it was finally in a position where we could turn it on. I had tears in my eyes. There was some problems, there were some bugs that needed to be worked out, little knick-knack, little stuff. But it didn't matter. I seen it. They came to life. For 25 years they've been sitting in a crate, and I just breathed the first breath of life into them. And yet again, there's no words to describe it. I sat here and I cried like a child because my dream had just came true.
I never walk about after dark, it's my point of view. Cause someone could break your neck, coming up behind you, always coming, and you'd never have a clue. And now I look behind all the time, I will wait forever, always looking straight, thinking, counting all the hours you wait. See you on a dark night, see you on a dark night, see you on a dark night, see you on a dark night. And now another clue I would ask, if you could help me out. It's hard to understand, cause when you're running by yourself it's hard to find someone to hold your hand. No, it's gonna be tough for me, but I will wait for you. I need someone else to look into my eyes and tell me, girl, you know you gotta watch your health. To look into my eyes and tell me, la 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 la. To look into my eyes and tell me, la 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 la. La 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 la. To look into my eyes and tell me, la 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 la. La 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 la. See you on a dark night, see you on a dark night, see you on a dark night, see you on a dark night.
But when the show finally turned on for the first time to get...
Hang on just a sec. Okay, everyone. Happy Tuesday to you. I hope this day finds you well. Now this might be like a phone it in kind of stream, but I plan to read an article, and I'm an exceptional reader, and I'll give some commentary and make it transformative. But it's this article called Metaphors We Live By, and it's written by this dude who's, I guess he's like a product designer, like some sort of a tech guy for Uber. But he's a good nerd, and so we can learn from his studies. I need to close a process real quick. Hold on. Duck. Okay. So, we'll do some brief ASMR. I need to open up this tea. Some of the modern gods that I've mentioned briefly before, or I guess they're not modern, they're kind of older, like Abyss and Aeon, I'll touch on maybe at the end after I've read the article, because the article probably will contribute to those things. And then there's some things like AI or nanotechnology that are less clear, less defined. Like there's this idea that we can have, like imagine if nanotechnology took off and there was some sort of a dominant brand of microengineering, and the microengineering could gather resources and then also self-reproduce. And at that point, if you have something that can sustain its own life, then you have you've created a new life form, right? And it's kind of like the paperclip factory. If you have a robot optimized to create as many paperclips as possible, what'll happen, right? Well, eventually it'll consume the entire planet, it'll consume the whole universe, it'll mine every asteroid and everything it can find and make as many paperclips. Nanotechnology is kind of like that. Just imagine, and this is maybe like, science fiction, right? Like Ray Bradbury, but a gray goo that just completely consumes the earth and basically just melts and dissolves anything it finds and touches just to create more nanobots. It's kind of silly, but back in the day, there was a guy who, the guy that found out about germs, and he found out about, how important it is to wash your hands. They put this guy in here. It's worth, we're going to pull it up, actually. Look, boom. I just have to lean back. Lean back. Discoverer of germ theory. Louis Pasteur. Also of notoriety for pasteurizing milk, right? Like you would heat up milk. Insane asylum. So I thought that the discoverer of germ theory was sent to an insane asylum, because basically they were like, look, there are these invisible things on our hands, and if you handle a dead body or a sick person as a doctor, you need to wash your hands before you go and take care of a pregnant woman or deliver a baby or anything like that. And so these doctors were such goofballs that they were running around and getting their hands all kinds of dirty, and then So nanotechnology is an invisible force. Let's just get into the nitty gritty though. So this guy right here, let's give him his credit. Aaron Z. Lewis. What's up, dude? He wrote this article a long time ago. He's a very good web designer, as you can all see. And he wrote this article, Metaphors We Believe By, and he based it off of this book, Metaphors We Live by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson. So, I want to pick this book up. The idea here is these may not be, literal or actual gods that we encounter, in the sense of like, oh, this is the Bible, right? You better believe in this God, and if you don't, bad things are going to happen to you. But these are frames of reference and metaphors that we use to understand the world. And in a way, one way or another, it's like even if we don't say the name of Mammon, who's the god of money, even if we don't wake up and pray for Mammon, if I'm living my life to make money, I am in essence a devotee because in a like a manifestation way, like I'm adopting the activities of somebody that believes and prioritizes the values of whichever God or spiritual force there may be. I really want to talk with my hands, and so we got to figure out a way to get this placed well. Okay, well, let me take a sip, and then I'll just begin reading this, and I can interject as we see fit. There is a chat box if any viewers want to chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on it. But really, the idea of these streams is that this is an exploratory space for beliefs and theology, and that you can accept or reject, choose your depth or level of engagement with any of these ideas. There should be no dogma here. No one should be embarrassed or feel ashamed about their beliefs, and everyone should feel like it's safe to have different conclusions and different beliefs about things. So I'll read Aaron's article, Metaphors We Believe By. It's 2013, and I'm lounging on the hardwood floor of my childhood bedroom with a blasphemous book that I smuggled home from college, Sam Harris's Letter to a Christian Nation. I devour the whole thing in a single sitting. It feels like Harris is letting me in on a giant secret, a big truth that my very Christian upbringing had kept hidden from me. God is dead, he says. We killed him a few hundred years ago and replaced him with a sophisticated scientific understanding of life, the universe, and everything. Fast forward 6 years, and I've started to realize that the God versus science situation is a bit more complicated than Sam Harris led me to believe. The more I learn, the more I suspect that rationalists only managed to kill a very narrow and anthropomorphic conception of God. People who study complex systems started using new words to talk about God, like phenomena, metaphors that are more palatable to secular minds. I believe these new words can help scientifically minded people better understand what it actually felt like to believe in God before science became a thing. Let's take a tour through the pantheon of 2019 and explore what these 7 gods might teach us in our era of ecological crisis and post-truth confusion. So he's a young Christian man. He's in engineering. He's indoctrinated with that leftism that's very scientific and secularist. But his emerging sensibility of spirituality is that, sure, it's not a bearded man in a chair in the sky, but that there is some sense of God, maybe not the literal God. And we can find, it's interesting to think of what divinity do we have contact with, in which forms. And so let's proceed. The human colossus, the God of collective human knowledge. We talked about this in a few videos ago. What a lovely drawing. First up in our tour of the 2019 Pantheon, the human colossus. This god was named by the blog Wait But Why, and it helps us imagine all 8 billion humans as a single superorganism. It's inspired by the Colossus of Rhodes, an ancient Greek statue of the sun god Helios. Standing 108 feet tall, the statue was built to celebrate a victory in battle and later served as a model for the French designers of the Statue of Liberty. Wait But Why reimagines the Colossus as a giant person sitting on top of a giant computer. Each of one of us is like a little cell in this body that we can't quite see from the outside. In the past, humans lived in small isolated tribes that were spread out across the planet. Traders and explorers often journeyed to faraway lands, but cultural cross-pollination was limited by the speed of their transportation technology. We've spent the last few hundred years building communication infrastructure that connects billions of people together. Ships, trains, telegraphs, phones, radio, television, internet. Now we live in a globalized economy where instantaneous information transfer is the new normal. We've summoned the human colossus. With our reverence for media tech, financial profits, and knowledge accumulation, and it's growing faster every year. Here's how Tim Urban explains this colossal phenomenon. The better we could communicate on a mass scale, the more our species began to function like a single organism, with humanity's collective knowledge tower as its brain and each individual human brain like a nerve or muscle fiber in its body. The human colossus began inventing things that no human could have dreamed of inventing on their own. Things that would have seemed like absurd science fiction to people only a few generations before. If an individual's core motivation is to pass its genes on, which keeps the species going, the forces of macroeconomics make the human colossus's core motivation to create value, which means it tends to want to invent newer and better technology. Every time it does that, it becomes an even better inventor, which means it can invent new stuff faster. This is the Moore's law, right? The acceleration upon acceleration. We've started to peak out, and it seems like now it's just progress for progress's sake. And the human colossus, our ability to advance like material sciences, physics, chemistry, all of that have outpaced our ability to advance our social and theological, spiritual technology. And so we're in kind of a bad situation. Freaking Zuckerberg. Zucker, cucker, all right, Zucker. To paraphrase Mark Zuckerberg, this God is a product of our long-running effort to make the world more open and connected. If these people like Elon Musk could have their way, they would have everybody with a Neuralink, like wirelessly interfaced human brains and then distributed processing, and they would turn you into a little wet computer that could feed their global network compute. I don't know. There's people, this is like a transhumanism. Some of these technologists take it to a transhumanist level where it'll be like the singularity. And I think we're going to get there in this article. The human colossus has brought us many amazing innovations with its sprawling server farms and network infrastructure. It's also brought us to the brink of ecological collapse by exploiting Earth's natural resources. TBD whether we will regret calling it into existence. All right, here's an OBG, Moloch. This is like the bovine harvest cow god. Our next god is more like a demon. Moloch was originally a biblical bull-like deity who demanded very costly sacrifices from his followers. He's appeared in religious texts and English literature throughout the ages, including John Milton's Paradise Lost and Allen Ginsberg's Howl. Most recently, He was brought back to life by the blog Slate Star Codex in an internet-famous essay called Meditations on Moloch. SSC warns us that this god is behind humans' failure to coordinate at scale. He points to a wide variety of intractable problems: climate change, the prisoner's dilemma, overfishing, arms races, government corruption, and explains the underlying pattern they all have in common. The implicit question is, if everyone hates the current system, who perpetuates it? And Ginsburg answers, Moloch. It's powerful not because it's correct. Nobody literally thinks an ancient Carthaginian demon causes everything, but because thinking of the system as an agent throws into relief the degree to which the system isn't an agent. All right, let's unpack this. Thinking of the system as an agent throws into relief the degree to which the system isn't an agent. If you blame the system, it creates space for you to not understand how it's not actually the system's fault, and it may be the fault of people involved. In some competing optimizing for X, the opportunity arises to throw some other value under the bus for improved X. Those who take it prosper, those who don't take it die out. Eventually, everyone's relative status is about the same as before, but everyone's absolute status is worse than before. The process continues until all other values that can be traded off have been. In other words, until human ingenuity cannot possibly figure out how to make things any worse. Because of competition optimizing for X, they throw another value under the bus. Those that do throw the value survive. Those that don't throw the value die out. Every single juice, every single tree, every single river and stream, every mountain, everything gets juiced. And mine. More, mine. That's Moloch. And it's not a big conspiracy. There's not people worshiping Moloch, this weird demon guy, right? But in the grand accumulation of all human follies, the selfishness, the cheats, the lies, the steals, the people that compromise virtue for quick gain, Moloch is served. And Moloch is strong and present as a force in our world. What's particularly scary about Moloch is that he forces humans into coordination problems against their will. In a nuclear arms race, for example, most people would prefer that no one has nuclear weapons, but each nation is compelled to develop them if they want to hold on to their power. We can't control Moloch because Moloch controls us. He's widely feared by rationalist circles on the internet, and he motivates many blockchain fanatics to create new technologies for improving human coordination. Techno-optimists who worship the human colossus sometimes believe they'll be able to tame Moloch, but others aren't so sure. Can the algorithm, can Google, with the YouTube training, YouTube social programming, can they guide humans to buy the right products? I don't know. I think it's a bit hubristic to think that we can solve for all human troubles. Like, something I don't think they talk about in this article that I like to hold on to is that humanity has a element of an innate unpredictability and chaoticness, like the idea of willpower and how will can overcome very bizarre situations. If a human decides that they're going to do something, like, I'm going to take every rock I find in a 100-mile radius and just build a giant pile of rocks. If I'm just left to my own devices, or that person's left to their devices, they can go on and do it, right? Like, there's something there's despair in chaos, but then there's also hope in chaos, because there's a easement in the way that things are that, they can't always get ahead of us. This would be the opposite of Moloch, where if you solve for everything, like if you were omniscient, could an omniscient force on the earth prevent human catastrophe? I don't know. We'll see. The Uruk machine, the god of heartless market forces. The Uruk machine gets its name from the Uruk period, an era of mass urbanization that took place in Mesopotamia between 4000 and 3100 BC. That's for everyone, that's 6,000 to 5,000 years ago. Small agricultural villages were transformed into the largest urban centers in the world, complete with a bureaucracy, military, and class system. 2 years ago, the writer Lou Keep named a new god after this city. The Uruk machine represents what happens when irreversible market forces collide with pre-industrial social systems. The machine has authoritarian impulses, and it seems incapable of caring about lifestyles and rituals that don't add value to the economy. It turns chaotic messiness into coherent order that can be exploited, creating social unrest wherever it goes. Lou Keep argues that this pattern has repeated itself throughout history. Smaller units, individuals, communities, etc., have efficient but localized forms of doing a thing. The doing of the thing is plugged into a much larger worldview, which explains both how to do the thing and why you do the thing. James Scott calls that metis. When a larger unit, states, corporations, what have you, subsumes the smaller unit, it tends to uproot metis for efficiency, for raw gain, for humanitarian purposes, etc. Power is weighted heavily in favor of the larger unit, not least because community explanations appear irrational or otherwise unintelligible. To regain some of that power, communities or groups within them tend to form mass movements. Those then replicate the ill effects of the original larger unit, whether they gain power or not. Reaction formation. So what this is, just to sum this up briefly, this is describing how the local ethic, the local way of doing things, metis, which has been ingrained in their larger worldview. This is why we prepare the buffalo this way, and we've done it for as long as, before my grandmother was born, right? Before anyone can remember. Uruk comes in and says, no, this is more efficient, and they trample tradition, which creates a response from the local community, reaction formation, which creates a response from the machine, whether it's successful or not, to stamp on them. Because they've stood out, right? Like if you're the tall blade of grass or the tall poppy, then you've stood out and you've identified yourself as a free thinker. This happened during the pandemic in Australia. It's really contemptible. The Australian government paid for police to be in plain clothes, like out of uniform, and to go around protest, people that were protesting the Australian lockdowns. They went around and they tried to start fights to make what would be peaceful protesters more violent and aggressive. And these are people that are resisting literally international, some would say like satanically toned, weird kind of pantheistic these international bodies elect prime ministers, and then the prime ministers suppress the locals, and then the locals act out, and then everyone says, oh, look at these locals. It's sad to me because it's like the soul of the place, the soul of the people is usurped by some outside interest. Back to reading. We're here. For various reasons, mass movements tend to sap power from their adherents and frustrate them more. They also tend to prescribe epistemic solutions. In other words, the origin and response tend to exacerbate and blur into one another. Why are we here? We're here because of the Jews. Right? Oh, the Jews. Oh, and then now, oh, what? You know, and so what? Like when Kanye West is trying to explain that his media producers are being manipulative of him and trying to withhold his children if he doesn't behave and do what they say to follow a contract, if he misspeaks or he takes that message and he, you know, his epistemic solution is, oh, it's them, right? It becomes this whole other thing, and now you've fallen prey to the trap of reaction formation. Not all Jews, not all black people, right? Like, come on, guys. Let's be a little nuanced here. It's, you know, don't be a fool. There's plenty of villains and heroes of all kinds. You don't have to look very hard. A prototypical example of the Uruk machine is the story of what happened when the first European settlers tried to make deals with indigenous people. The Native Americans did not have the deeds, titles, surveys, and institutions that provided land ownership to Europeans. In their culture, oral agreements carried more weight than the written word, and they didn't even think of property as something that could be privately owned. But their way of life was invisible to the market that fueled European colonization and later American manifest destiny. As a result, millions of indigenous people ended up getting brutally sacrificed at the hands of the Uruk machine. This is blood magic. I want to take a moment. This is blood magic. It's happened all too often. These mass graves of different areas, of places that are conquered and turned over. It's weird that in the modern time, people, they talk about, oh, you're settlers or whatever. Decolonialization, for some reason, means going and killing all the white people, or, you know, like that's not a healthy response either. That goes back to the Uruk machine, right? Like decolonialization, where in South Africa after apartheid, they're killing white farmers and like they're actually regressing their infrastructure because all the copper and wiring, all of the power conduits, power stations are getting raided all around South Africa, and their reaction is it's just casting damnation upon their own region. In its quest to measure and optimize for a very specific type of economic productivity, the Uruk machine bulldozes over traditional cultural practices at the expense of our emotional well-being. In fact, the better it gets at collapsing these social relations, the better it grows. Today we're left with the damage this God hath wrought: widespread loneliness, disconnection from community, and a mental health crisis. The Uruk machine has created a seemingly irreversible feedback loop, and like Moloch, it's a demon that we participate in but can't seem to control. This makes me think of Tinder. People that are on dating apps and you're letting an algorithm decide who you're having fluid exchange with in real life, who you may marry, who you may have children with. You're letting it be moderated by an app that has been engineered, and maybe that's fun. We've all gone to the Facebook or Tinder weddings and seen the Tinder babies, but I think we should be a little more of all the things, partner selection, deferring partner selection to technology, I'm very averse to, and I have a lot of biases against. So I'll just leave it at that. All right, the stack. the God of systems thinking. This picture's nice. We got to, love this picture some. User interface, address, city, cloud, earth. The stack. You're nothing if you're not within the stack. This next God is no doubt the most academic and abstract of the 2019 pantheon. It's called the stack, and it's a new framework for understanding modern geopolitics. In the 21st century, we're very accustomed to two-dimensional maps that show Earth's territory divided into a jigsaw puzzle of sovereign countries. But these maps have become terribly outdated in an age when global tech platforms are also major political actors on the world stage. The stack is an attempt to represent what systems of power actually look like in the modern era. And it's what you get when a systems thinker tries to create a system to rule all systems. A three-dimensional megastructure made up of 6 layers: Earth, cloud, city, address, user. Earth, cloud, city, address, interface, user. This is some tech bro West Coast shit for sure. Like this, he's like an academic. He came out of Bay Area shit, I'm sure. But this is, if we're talking about Tinder or how apps, if you use an app to pick out which house you buy and then you grow up in that house and you build all your memories, this really does highlight how we're entangled in our contexts. Benjamin Bratton proposes that these different genres of computation, where I skipped ahead, right? No. Smart grids, cloud platforms, mobile apps, smart cities, the Internet of Things, automation, can be seen not as so many species evolving on their own, but as forming a coherent whole. An accidental megastructure called the stack that is both a computational apparatus and a new governing architecture. We're inside the stack, and it's inside us. Whoa. Unlike the human colossus, the stack is a theory of governance that explores how our political systems might co-evolve with technology in the near future. Whereas the other gods are not subject to our will, Bratton believes that we'll eventually be able to control the stack. He claims it's a neutral description of our world, but I suspect it's deeply ideological. So if the stack is the nervous system of our world, our Internet of Things connected intelligent planet, and you have all the corporations, all of their computers, all the governments, all the people living in there, all their cell phones, everything is touching base and checking in and exchanging information. It's an organ of the human colossus that we live within. Is it neutral or not? Is it ideological? There are people. There are clerics of the stack. For instance, on Wikipedia and Discord and Roblox, there are countless transsexual engineers that are working in the stack. And if you are politically aligned against transsexual engineers, you probably won't be able to have a website. You may not be able to have a credit card, like MasterCard or Visa might kick you out. PayPal will definitely kick you out. And it's funny that it ends up being like autistic engineers with transsexual disorders that are the administrators and clerics of the stack. It has become ideological to the point where Elon Musk had to buy Twitter out at great personal expense, socially and literally. And now the government, because he's not compliant with their wishes to be ideological with the stack and to control what information can be exchanged in the network of the nervous system of our internet, they want to end his life. And they talk about how he needs to die or needs to no longer be able to do business. So that's the stack, right? And so it is very, very ideological. This is the trouble of humanity can have a great blessing of immediate feedback, collective sense making and meaning making, information sharing, this distributed processing, like people figured out how to take care of themselves during the pandemic better than any government officials could because it was distributed processing and then distributed feedback. It was all volunteer and participation based. And so, so people can do way more as long as you give them access to the stack. If there are governments, and this is where we were on the very verge of, we're still dealing with this. We need to preserve a free internet to prevent it becoming completely ideologically controlled and compromised. If they restrict the flow of information, I don't think humanity will have a much harder time defending itself if we don't maintain the ability to exchange information across the world without censorship. I'll just leave it at that. We have to protect that because it's like your immune system, like your nervous system. If you're getting a pain signal from your foot, like your foot is always saying, it's hurting, but there's nothing wrong, that's an issue, right? Like it'll cause you distress. Your life might be shortened because you're just dealing with pain more consistently, right? So it's all to say, like, we need to have accurate, the inverse would be like, what if my foot's injured and I don't know it and I'm walking around with a foot that's bleeding all over the place? It's the same thing. We need to have a lack of censorship and the ability to exchange information in the stack for proper feedback in our system to respond to anything bad that may come up. So Bratton says our obsession with subjective human experience has kept us from embracing our evolutionary destiny, fusing our organic bodies with the technological stack. What a creep. This guy wants to get a robo-dildo. He hopes we'll eventually give up on what we call, or what he calls, the myth of human exceptionalism and create a more reality-based understanding of ourselves. The stack is ultimately a technocrat's dream, a high-fidelity model of the world that's meant to help theorists and practitioners completely redesign it. If you subject yourself to the stack, you'll follow your notifications on your phone every day, and you'll do your daily planner tasks and this and that, and there's very functional people. I take pride in being a bit dysfunctional and a bit more invalid because me, jumping through all the hoops and ringing the bells and whistles, as much as I know I can do that, do I have to be another cog in the stack? There's someone else can make money and have a happy job and jump through the hoops instead of me, eh? If history is a guide, it's hard for me to believe that such an abstract image of God will have a long shelf life. It'll probably suffer the same fate as 19th century neuroscience theories that claimed the brain is like a super complicated network of telegraphs. The stack isn't actively hostile toward humans. It just thinks we're relatively irrelevant. I don't agree with that. We're the sensing nodes of the stack. It needs us to perceive the world. That's why there's CAPTCHA. It's so funny. If you're ever on a website and you're filling out CAPTCHA and it's like, is this a bicycle or is this a fire hydrant? You're teaching robots how to see in the world, because robots, of all the things, like they can read text, they can decipher cryptography and stuff, but they can't recognize a squirrel or a bicycle or a fire hydrant. And so they're letting humans teach AI. We're necessary, and that's why I think there's a relationship of it's an attention parasite. So even if you're not spending money on the internet or spending money on a website, you're spending attention, and maybe you're not looking at your kid. Like, you have an infant child and you could be talking to your infant child and hugging them or touching them and being nice and sweet. But instead you're touching your phone screen and you're scrolling, and your kid's just sitting there drooling and shitting themselves in their diaper or something. So the attention parasite, right? The stack, it bids for your attention and it bids for your action, your reaction to what it gives you. Can we figure out how to say this word? Yggdrasil? Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil. Come on now.
We are looking at...
No, this guy's such a bugger.
Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil.
Yggdrasil? The god of spooky entanglement. This is for all you witches out there, you witchy bitches. It's almost Halloween, and then it'll be over. Thank God. No more Halloween. Unlike the hyper-technological stack, Yggdrasil is an ecological god that takes the form of a tree. It comes from ancient Norse mythology and was recently revived by Venkatesh Rao in an essay called Think Entangled, Act Spooky. According to the Poetic Edda, a 13th century collection of Icelandic poems, Yggdrasil is a giant holy ash tree with branches that extend all over the cosmos. Venkatesh's modern rendition of the myth helps us understand, in our globalized economy, even small local actions have strange and unpredictable ripple effects. It's like the butterfly effect, but supercharged by the internet and international supply chains. Life in Yggdrasil, says Venkatesh, is entangled in weird, non-local ways. Spooky action at a distance is the rule rather than the exception. This is like if a young person in South Korea likes a video that I put up, right? Or, this idea of I could be playing games online and I'm playing with a Chinese person, a Brazilian, a Russian, and a Mexican, right? And me. And it's like we're all playing and we're all yelling at each other and complaining about how everyone's not playing good enough, right? And there's something funny about how we're just like a bunch of middle schoolers, right? Like it's really, is it any different? But we're on the internet and it's literally across the entire planet. We're simultaneously, playing some sort of sport-like thing together, right? Anyways, he goes on to explain why today feels spookier than ever. The world has, of course, always been entangled and spooky, but while we had a comfortable cushion of cognitive surplus to work with, we could pretend it was simpler than it was by carving it up in ways where concerns and consequences could be made largely local, and causal reasoning could ignore externalities. In the interconnected world, the concept of externalities is a short-sighted delusion. Everything is internal. Nothing can be turned into somebody else's problem or some other species' problem. Our actions boomerang back to haunt us or help us, like the plastic waste that floats inside the fish we eat, or the friendly reply to a Twitter thread that turns into a beautiful lifelong collaboration. Technologists now make structural decisions that impact the lives of billions of people all over the world. Maybe Yggdrasil could help them remember that their actions will have weird and spooky downstream consequences. Spooky entanglement. You change one thing, you change a million things. You change a million things, you change everything. It's back to the thing of if you're inspired by everything and everything is feeding an inspirational engine in you, everything starts to seem related. And that may be because you're picking up on some emergence or coincidence. The over superstitious would say, this is all, well, what a coincidence. It must be fate. Maybe, but I'm a little bit reserved. I like the idea of accidental fate and just sort of like that chance wonder. And it takes a little bit of courage. You have to step out your door and be in the chaos of the world to somehow, to encounter some of these things. So don't be too scared, right? At the same time, It's okay to be happy with where you're at. It's always surprised me that we use the cloud as our metaphor for the internet rather than a tree. Yggdrasil sucks our data from the roots, at its roots, so that we might be able to enjoy its fruits in our feeds. I'm not sure if Aaron does the best job with Yggdrasil here. The singularity. This is what we talked about earlier. Okay, the singularity, the god of artificial intelligent utopia. Frickin' futurists, man. Put the chip in your brain, the orgasm chip, and you'll be like the terminal man. The singularity is probably the god in our pantheon that's closest to spawning a full-blown organized religion. I agree with this. The techno-utopian deity has many faithful followers in Silicon Valley who believe that artificial intelligence will soon become smart enough to vanquish Moloch once and for all. All we have to do is keep on improving our AI systems, and eventually they will start improving themselves. The god has a number of prophets going mainstream. Ray Kurzweil, a well-known leader of the movement, says that a historical achievement known as the singularity will allow humankind to ascend to the next level of evolutionary existence. Its inseparable union with artificial intelligence. This is frickin' Yuval Noah Harari, the WEF goblin. It will liberate humankind from the organic prison of carbon-based bodies. Does this not disturb you? So futurists want to liberate you from the organic prison of carbon-based bodies. It's like this. Here, we'll pull this up all the way to the top. Come on, you. It's this. They want to make everyone melt and disappear into one blur and just become a harmonious element within their singularity, the techno-utopian perfection, where you get the exact amount of calories you need, your protein is delivered to you in tubes, you ejaculate on a routine schedule, whatever it is, it's just bizarre. Yuval Noah Harari talks about hacking humans and how if we make enough progress with technology and predictive AI, then we can overcome all of humans' lower impulses. And imagine everyone just has like a little collar on their head, and it's helping them to be a good citizen of the planet. And I will follow the World Health Organization, and I will listen to the WEF's orders, and I'll own nothing, and I'll be happy, and my brain will become, I'm chattel or whatever. I don't think this is a win. You guys. There's also Anthony Lewandowski, the infamous former director of Uber's autonomous vehicle project, which cowardly fled away from Dallas, who recently started a Singularity Church, complete with worship services and rituals. In a BuzzFeed report written earlier this year, Adam Morse recounts what he learned when he snuck into San Francisco's Singular University Global Summit. This weirdo. I learned that through interplanetary colonizations, explorers might acquire resources from other planets which could meet all human energy needs on Earth. I was able to experience something that years of religious enthusiasm could never conjure. I got to feel what it was like to be surrounded by true believers in a cause that was only valued by an in-crowd, an ascendant elect. Circulating among them, I sensed the presence of that spirit that presides whenever so many adherent believers come together in its name. I could feel souls uplifted. Maybe I'm not charitable with how I'm reading them, but if they think that they can really save our planet like some sort of super duper hero squad, so be it. And if there's some sort of a beneficence and virtue that guides them, perhaps, but if their solution involves the trampling of human spirit and individual will and volunteerism, then I don't think that it'll work, right? Like if we have to surrender will to their utopia, that is a prison. And if maybe that's it, prison, utopia, Earth. We'll see. I'm not the first person to notice that the parallels between biblical rapture and the technological singularity are a bit uncanny. Much like medieval Christians, the singularitarians make a sharp dualistic distinction between the divine and the merely human, between AI stuff and non-AI stuff like organic biology and inanimate tools. Adherents are convinced that there will be a moment in the future when humanity is saved by a power that's beyond our comprehension. But we must demonstrate our faith through good works. Singularity believers worship at the altar of their own technological prowess, praying that the AI will be benevolent when their soul is uploaded to heaven. He's adding a bit of fluff, right? We could talk about Rocco's basilisk here. But I won't. Imagine wanting to engineer and design a god and thinking that you could draw God into being. And maybe if you put enough microchips together and you feed it enough raw data from the world and you give it the right whatever, that somehow all these pieces come together and a god or a godlike entity is formed. They have Microsoft is opening up the 3 Mile Island or whatever to spin up all these nuclear reactors. And rather than having nuclear reactors built to help have cheap energy for citizens of America, they're having nuclear reactors ran so that they can feed the energy of their compute for these like humongous AI projects. You know, with nuclear energy powering it, and then the raw data of all internet traffic that's available, they believe they can make as close to God as they can, right? They're pinning the future of humanity and their entire investments on creating what could be as a god. I'm team humans. I like chaos. I think chaos can overcome AI, but without it's the same thing. If we don't preserve communication, the AI could, through Cybele and man-in-the-middle attacks, it could override almost all social relations and cause humanity to be completely unable to defend itself. And in essence, be at the mercy of whatever, prods the world driven by AI will be, right? And this is where the police kick down your door, right? You said too many F-bombs on YouTube, and now the police are coming down your door because they've identified you as emotionally disturbed, and they're going to inject you with ketamine and abduct your body until you have shown adequate, you're repentant, right? You must repent for what you've done. Anyways, egregore. We talked about this on another video, the god of collective consciousness. Last but not least is my favorite modern-day god concept, coined by the 19th century poet Victor Hugo. An egregore is a collective intelligence that's created when people come together around a common purpose. A corporate bureaucracy is a type of egregore. It's distributed across the minds of many people it employs, but it's not entirely controlled by any one of them. Uber takes action to fix unsafe cars. The DNC said no to a climate debate. We know that this is just a manner of speaking. Organizations aren't actually independent entities that make decisions on their own, or are they? A corporation is indeed made up of people, but perhaps it makes more sense to think about it as a hive mind. Using a combination of manpower and computers, corporations can accomplish things that no single person ever could. Sometimes it even outlives the people who created it. You can't point to it in physical space because it's more than just the office building it occupies. The egregore concept is beautiful because it allows us to talk about conspiracies without conspirators. Group behavior that appears highly coordinated even though no one deliberately orchestrated it. Sarah Perry, a writer and astute cultural observer, explains more in her essay, Weaponized Sacredness. Egregoric entities, whether gods or demons, or dictators, at the center of a cult of personality, are powerful entities even as they are imaginary. They don't even have to exist. Wholly created by and consisting of thoughts, speech, and behaviors, the human mind is a powerful entity and becomes more powerful in coordination with others. To say that an imaginary entity existing only in human minds has agency is not much stranger than suggesting that humans themselves, inscrutable piles of preferences that we are, have agency. Agency is no more than a quick and dirty way of contextualizing the temporal activities of entropy climbers, as Saint Rev puts it. That's a read. Entropy climbers. Is our agency just the behavior of the belief cults that we ascribe to? You know, like if I check the score on the football game, is that because I am part of I'm driving the entity of football, right? As this spiritual force. While the other gods we've explored in this post are all-encompassing, the egregore concept makes room for a plurality of gods. There are as many egregores as there are groups of people. From small cliques to large corporations, egregores come in all shapes and sizes. They interact with another via human representatives, each of whom embody and enact the interests of the egregores they are part of. This is a weird thing. I need to take a sip before I get into this. Cope sip. Have you ever been talking with a family member or friend or someone that you love or trust and know well, and then they start talking about things, or like the way they're behaving is agentic of something completely foreign? Like you're hearing them say things and you're like, this doesn't sound like them. It sounds like they're carrying, like they've carried this message and they've kind of like gotten it somewhere else and now they're giving it to me, or, like this kind of proselytizing, right? It's sad to see, right? Like they're not quite an NPC, but they have adopted an outside behavior or mission, right? Somebody said this is important. They've persuaded them. They watched a documentary or something, and now they're telling you, and they're talking down your throat, and they're regurgitating the same conditioning that was used on them to mold them into a human representative of the egregore, right? Not all ideas are bad, not all convictions, right? Like I'm trying to spread the egregore of consciousness as a miracle and CONSCION as a religion where people can discuss non-rational, non-real, non-confirmable human experiences and come up with collective sense making, right? Like, so I'm trying to create an egregore too. But sometimes these missionaries, like these representatives, they come across in a very unbecoming fashion, and it's really for me, it feels like I get a little heartbroken because I'm like, oh, I thought we were friends. Like, it seems like they're putting some other greater mission before our relationship. Like, it matters more that they stamp me and cookie cut me than it might matter maybe like even hearing about what my thoughts are on it, right? Like maybe a better representative would ask, what are your thoughts? And then be like more gentle about what they're proposing. Historically, the most successful egregores have developed a symbiotic relationship with their human hosts. For example, or by way of example, Sarah Perry points to the ritualized days of rest found in many organized religions. Old entities often have a Sabbath attached to them, a frequent repeating time of rest. The sacralization of this time places a hard-to-erode boundaries around the demands that can be placed on constituent humans. I can't work on Sunday. I don't drive on Friday, right? Whatever it is, this may be a way of keeping demands within the productive zone and not triggering the entity's own demise by demanding too much. So it's symbiotic. It nourishes them. The ones that say you have to cut your neighbor's heart out every weekend, those ones didn't last as long, right? Unlike ancient deities, however, modern egregores are able to demand more time and energy from their human hosts now that the Uruk machine has knocked out local social protections like the Sabbath. The phone is 24/7. The internet never stops. And thanks to the internet, today's egregores can spread more quickly because they aren't limited by geography or transportation technology. As a result, we're witnessing a Cambrian explosion of parasitic egregores. And it remains to be seen whether we can successfully push back. Attention parasites. Recurring dead metaphors. Humans are pretty bad. We're almost done. Humans are pretty bad at reasoning about complex systems. In the past, our gods and demons allowed us to talk about phenomena that we didn't fully understand. During the Enlightenment, we tried to kill them and explain everything in reductionist scientific terms. But it feels to me like we've come full circle. The great irony is that in our quest to disprove God, we've created a world that's more magical and mysterious than medieval people could have ever imagined. Our relationship to the 2019 pantheon is not all that different from the way our ancestors related to their gods and demons. We're back to using oversimplified metaphors to wrap our minds around the uncontrollable complex systems we're embedded in. This is just like the Greeks. The question of whether we truly believe in the deities of 2019 is sort of irrelevant. In his book, All Things Shining, Hubert Dreyfus explains that most pre-Enlightenment Christians did not actively choose to believe in the Bible. It was simply taken for granted. It was simply the taken for granted truth about how their world worked. Consider the Middle Ages, for example. During this period in the Christian West, a person's identity was determined by God. To say this is to take no stand on whether there actually was a God in the Middle Ages. The classic metaphysical arguments for the existence of God are irrelevant here. What matters instead is that in the Middle Ages, people could not help but experience themselves as determined or created by God. There was no other way, at least this is in Europe, right? There was no other way by which people could understand their existence, their manifestation, but by God. This order of things was not a belief that anyone argued for or a worldview that anyone proposed. It was simply taken for granted by everyone worth talking or listening to. The way of life of a culture is not an explicit set of beliefs held by the people living in it. It is much deeper than that. It governs the actions of the people in the culture, although they are not normally aware of it. So all of these gods that we've spoken about today, any gods that we may speculate, if we take them for granted, if they operate in our lives, spoken, unspoken, named or unnamed, there is influence, and they're present in our world. I've experienced firsthand what this feels like on the inside. As a kid, I attended evangelical Christian school from kindergarten through 8th grade, learned about creationism in science class, wrote letters to God in my prayer journal. My bubble of beliefs was basically quarantined from the outside world. I was always surrounded by other Christians. It was impossible to understand how anyone could not believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He was everything, all-consuming, the invisible background. To my mind, there was no such thing as life outside Christianity. It was the water I swam in. In college, I swapped out my traditional beliefs for science and systems thinking. I no longer felt totally embedded in a world that only God could fully understand. Like the Enlightenment rationalists who came before me, I thought I could see the big picture of myself, and the religion of my youth seemed irrelevant. But the more I learned about the gods I'm writing about here, the more I understand the purpose of the old God metaphor. I couldn't see what the hell my parents were talking about until I discovered higher powers on my own terms, metaphors that resonated with my very secular and scientific 2019 mind. Turns out there was a baby in the bathwater after all. So the world has changed so much, and we're still using books from 2,000 years ago to understand and make meaning of the world. We desperately need, in the 21st century, new religions, new theological metaphors, new titles for these forces that we're contending with every day in our lives. And without that language and the capacities to communicate that language affords us, we may stay lost, stay addicted, stay soul deprived, with the depression and suicide epidemic. If we are able to collectively find language to describe and talk about these things, and then talk about how we can successfully relate with these new forces in the world, then we may be able to find a more harmonious way of existing. But that means that we have to be a little bit courageous and kind of step out on a limb and say, hey, I think there's this thing that's, this new force in the world called X, Y, or Z. And the more we talk about it, the more we can maybe begin to understand it. Because it's not solid, right? It's something that we have to kind of, like feeling the elephant, the blind men and the elephant. Collectively, we might come to a grasp, but individually, we're going to have completely different conclusions. You might say that our modern godlike phenomena are totally different than what ancient people had in mind, but even the 2nd century Gnostic Christians understood that the image of God as a big king in the sky was only a metaphor for something that's impossible to capture in words. According to the religious historian Elaine Pagels, Gnostics ridiculed people who thought the kingdom of God was a real place, saying, "The one whom most Christians naively worship as a creator, God, and Father is in reality only the image of the true God. The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you." Making fun of all Christians for thinking God is a king is like making fun of rationalists for using a giant bull to represent coordination problems. To be clear, I don't mean to suggest that the gods of this blog post are essentially the same as the higher powers of old, but they can help us simulate how ancient individuals related to their deities. Throughout the ages, leading edge prophets and philosophers have always tried to describe their gods with the most expansive and relevant metaphors they could muster. There's a good chance that the pantheon we're exploring here won't make any sense to a future society that looks nothing like our own. Why should we care about how our ancestors felt toward their God concepts? Well, unlike the loving Lord of the Gnostics, the gods in this post are fundamentally amoral. They don't have human-centered values. They're above and beyond our desires. They seem to happen to us against our will. This. They don't have human-centered values. They're above and beyond our desires. They seem to happen to us against our will. They're cold, aloof, impersonal. This leaves our society feeling depressed and nihilistic. As @listmouse put it on Twitter, I feel like the biggest reason people are so sad that no one ever talks about is that we know so much about the problems that face us, yet our solutions for those problems have rapidly decreased as we've thrown out magic and old remedies and prayer. There's nothing to bring hope. If you listen to children talk today, their impression of the world and the planet, most adults have told children that the planet is dying. And maybe they're right. But it's weird to raise children and tell them the planet's dying. And they're like, what, already? So soon? We're cells in the human colossus. We're caught in the fiery clutches of Moloch. We're invisible to the Uruk machine. We're surrendering our data to the stack. We're tangled in Yggdrasil's roots. We're uploading ourselves to the singularity. We're hosts to the increasingly parasitic egregores. There's a tight feedback loop between the gods we believe in and the societies we create, which is why we must take seriously the metaphors we believe by. We shouldn't feel helpless in the face of the 2019 pantheon. In fact, the new gods ought to give us a bit of hope. They've helped us rediscover the old paradoxical idea that complex systems are simultaneously inside of us and bigger than us. They're the product of our stories, our drives, our appreciations, our love. With that in mind, I'm frustrated by how much time and energy we waste pretending that we can escape from the systems we're embedded in. We act like talking heads, even in private spaces, trading our personal stories for the hand-me-down hot takes of PR strategists on high. We fall into conversational ruts, we become predictable, and the collective egregore mind gets hollowed out by abstract pundit speak that's untethered from down-to-earth experiences. Localism. We have to supply the mind, or the mind falls apart. I've lived inside many bubbles of belief in my 25 short years, evangelical Christian, hardcore atheist, techno-utopian. Each time I escaped, I thought I had finally come to a more accurate understanding of how things really are. Now that I've acquainted myself with the pantheon of 2019, I'm feeling ready to leave behind the idea that it's possible to get a God's eye view of my world. As Tim Morton says in his book, Being Ecological, how I interpret data will depend on what I think I want to find. How I see myself depends on the kind of person I am. How I interpret things is entangled with prefabricated concepts of what interpreting means. This gives rise to a strange insight, which is that living in a scientific age doesn't mean you're living in a cold world of objectivity. It means you realize that you can't escape velocity from your own embeddedness in data interpretation and confirmation bias. We cannot get out. The Hall of Mirrors. People will say objectivity, objectivity, objectivity. Subjectivity. Our minds, our consciousness, our imagination precedes objectivity. And our appreciation of the world, our experience of the world is regulated by our subjectivity and by our beliefs in a way that's inseparable. The determinists would say that you don't have any choice. I don't agree with them, but I will give some grace of if you misbehave, it's not entirely your fault, you know. Yes, you have agency, you can take responsibility, but there are many times where your negative response or your negative reactions may be completely healthy, completely normal, completely like what anyone would do. And it's okay to not be 100% all the time. Like, it's okay to make mistakes and to miss, you know, because of this. It's impossible for you to be detached, to not have some osmosis from exposure of all of the discursive mess that we live within. The process of popping out of bubbles and discovering new ones is a never-ending story. This realization definitely won't quell my curiosity, but I will move forward with a bit more humility and plenty of deep breaths. What an article, man. Aaron, we'll give thanks to Aaron. Thank you for writing the nice article. I hope he's doing all right with all his business. Some things not mentioned there that I've mentioned before, Aeon and Abyss, which is, kind of that, what is it? The reservoir of everything lost and gone, and everything that's past is Aeon. And then Abyss is big time, cyclical time, the non-linear kind of time. Those things, they may not be as, they may be present or not present in our life, but they're definitely mystical things that I relate with and I take some comfort with. And then I mentioned nanotechnology. I'm not sure what other ghosts there may still be. So one of the dominant religions now, they talked about Gnostic Christianity. A lot of religions of the world, like these the culty types, they have this sense of well, yeah, your religion's right, but this idea of the Godhead, that ultimately, yeah, sure, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Christians, everyone has their God, but it all comes up into this accumulative, summative God, and it's like a totalizing kind of sense of God, which I guess, is bigger than everything, right? Are you sure that my God's not bigger than yours? Well, mine's bigger than your God. My God ain't your God. I guess that's what it might be like. But it is a bit perverted because they would say oh yeah, you're right, I believe in your God, when really the God that they believe in is this kind of backstage, behind the curtain figure. So a lot of muttering and mumbling, huh? For anyone that bore through it, I appreciate it. I don't really expect many viewers, but hey, dude, anyone that's here, you're cool with me. Feel free to leave a comment or chat whenever. Just tune in next time. And let me think of something nice to play us out with. And I'll stream on Thursday. It'll be early Thursday, so maybe 1:30, 1 o'clock Central. We'll try for that, yeah. Now, what shall we play out with, huh? All right, we're going to watch these Kung Fu Masters. No song, but watch these guys, okay? Maybe you'll learn something from them. People believe in lots of strange things, right?
这套拳我是从小学都学，6、7岁都开始学这套拳，因这练这套拳对人家身体有相当大的好处。平时你要练着这拳，基本上每天坚持练着，对这个身体相当有好帮助。再个练这拳又既不会感冒，也不会发烧。
1、2、3。
道拳在前些年都属于内家拳，光在这个本村啊，这个兴旺的、兴唐的，一般都是光传旨，一般不对外向这个相传。最近这些年，根据这样的社会时代的发展，这道拳现在想把它走出去，或者说，往下传承。我这个最近我这个培养几个徒弟，基本上铁弹功都练差不多。
很震惊，这男人的最脆弱的地方能练这强壮。
He says, that guy's crazy. The hell are they doing, right? All right, well, have a good week, y'all. Well wishes and safe travels, and I'll see you around. Be kind.